Hi everyone, I'm Sherry Grant from New Zealand. I'm here today with American conductor Emily Freeman Brown at her house in Perrysburg, Ohio. Emily Freeman Brown is music director and conductor of the Bowling Green Philharmonia and Opera Theater at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, where in 2016 she was made Professor of Creative Arts Excellence. Brown has led 8 CDs on Albany Records with the Bowling Green Philharmonia, curating new American music. She studied conducting and cello at the Royal College of Music in London, England, where she was twice winner of the Sir Adrian Boult Conducting Prize. Brown's conducting career has taken her all over the world, and she is also married to the renowned composer Samuel Adler. Thank you for joining a discussion, Emily. I very much appreciate your boundless energy, and I have enjoyed our recent conversation on poetry, arts, and music.
Me too.
You were the first woman to receive a doctorate in orchestral conducting at the Eastman School of Music. That was such a remarkable achievement, and these days we're starting to see more and more female composers shining on stage. What brought you to embark on this journey as a conductor?
I think that a lot of it had to do with the way I was brought up. My mother and father, I have 3 sisters, so for all of us, they very much wanted us to feel that possibilities were open to us as young people. And I played the cello and the piano as a young person, and my interest grew about conducting the more I played in an orchestra.
So you have conducted many orchestras around the world. How did you balance family life and a busy career? And what is it like to be married to another amazing musician?
Well, that's a whole series of questions, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's always, it can be a challenge to balance family life and career. I think that you do whatever you can and you keep on working at it. And I think that in terms of practical advice, when you're preparing new scores for an event, you start studying very early and you set aside enough time to really do your work along with a busy daily schedule. One of the advantages of being a conductor at a university is that we have months off where we can work to prepare for the next season. You also asked me about being married to a composer, yes?
A musician, actually.
A musician.
Another musician.
Yeah, my husband Samuel Adler. And actually I think of it as nothing but an advantage, because if there's ever a question, we have these very long conversations about even the most practical things having to do with music and the world at large.
It must be some very interesting conversations you have all the time.
Absolutely. Did I answer everything that you asked about there?
Yes, and I understand you also teach the conducting courses here in Ohio. What's your advice for young aspiring conductors, and what kind of knowledge and learning attitude should they bring with them to you before they can become a good conductor as well?
Well, conducting is a very broad field, and it actually, as with many fields, involves lifelong learning. So it depends, for me, the way I work with students depends on where they are when they come to me in my program. Some students come with a broad-based background in music. Either, for me, it's orchestral music, that's my specialty, and a lot of times because they play an instrument, they have a basis in the repertoire from their experience, either as, mostly, believe it or not, they come as string players, and they're interested in conducting, so they have a basic foundation in conducting, and they come to me and we work on skills like developing score reading skills at the piano, singing, so that they really get closely connected to the music that they are working on. there's always a development of a kind of a personal voice as a conductor, so that the conductor has confidence in themselves as a musician. That a lot of that confidence comes from developed expertise. It's based upon good, healthy experiences, and that's what we provide, is chances to get up in front of a young orchestra and develop their conducting technique and their sense of musical styles. I mean, as you know, every musical period, for instance, classical style is very different from romantic style. So there's a lot for a young conductor to absorb and work on. And I really think of it as a balance of developing themselves as musicians inside, but also developing their understanding of the piece in front of them. We often talk about how the score, when a composer writes a piece, they are essentially creating a world unto itself within a piece of music. And most of the questions that you have, that a young conductor or a young musician has about a piece of music, come from the score. So we spend a lot of time with the scores and looking for the right questions, and then go from there.
So from the practical aspect, do these young conductors get a lot of hands-on time with the youth orchestras? How do they connect with the orchestra themselves?
Well, that's I audition everybody, and one of the most important questions is how they speak to the orchestra, or how they speak to the ensemble. It's a college level ensemble. That means there are undergraduate and graduate students in the orchestra. So the age range can be anywhere from 18 to mid and 20s, depending on what level they're in. Some of them are older than that. We have some doctoral students too. So the way they address the ensemble really says a lot about their own experience, their confidence in themselves, and their confidence in the ensemble to do what they want. Isn't that?
Yes.
That's interesting. But I also, because many of the conductors who I work with are not quite beginners, but are at the beginning of their career, we talk a lot about technique and the purpose of conducting technique and the idea of communicating through gesture.
Right. So can you tell us about your book on conducting?
My book on conducting.
And also later on, maybe the 8 CDs you have recorded with the Bowling Green Philharmonia. And I've seen the repertoire, and I'm really looking forward to listening to all of them with those commentaries. It's very interesting.
Well, the book on conducting is a dictionary for the modern conductor. It was written by request from the publisher, Rowman and Littlefield. They were looking for a kind of a general, not a textbook, it's not a textbook, but I think of it more as an enhancement book for younger conductors, but not only younger conductors. It is a broad-based book that spans anything from terminology, conductor biographies, institutional entries where we talk about different institutions including publishers, orchestras, societies. It's mostly based in the United States, though not all, and the entries are not long. It's not meant to be you can see it's not that big, so it's not meant to be complete, but it's meant to have a lot of introductory information. One of the most fun things that I did was in the terminology, doing a lot of foreign terminology and finding words and phrases from scores that we all know, scores of Mahler, Wagner, Debussy, so in French, in Italian, in German, finding terms and putting them in context so that it's not just a dictionary of a single word, but or a definition of a single word, but it has some context. So there are also descriptions of how to conduct certain kinds of gestures. It describes certain conducting technique, and goes on from there. I hope it's a helpful book, and that it makes a contribution to conducting and the study of conducting. And now you also asked me about the CDs. The university that I teach at has, in our College of Musical Arts, we have a concentration in not all of our programs, but in many of our programs in contemporary music. And so we have at our university the Mid-American Center for Contemporary Music, and we have alongside that a doctoral program with a concentration in contemporary music. That doctoral degree is for composers, it's for conductors, it's for performers, and this whole thing is because of our university's, our College of Music's concentration in contemporary music. So when I came to Bowling Green, it seemed obvious to me, well, I was going to be doing more contemporary music than at most universities. And it took me quite a while to work out how to do a CD with a university orchestra, and what the mission of it should be. And so what we have done is worked on pieces where we had a composer coming to campus who could coach and work with the orchestra on the piece, and then we would perform it, usually as part of our New Music Festival. And then after we had done the performances and worked with the composers, we would record the pieces and then edit them for these CDs. And each one of the CDs has taken 2 or 3 years to collect the repertoire. It's not something that happens quickly. But the goal is to make available to a broad audience the music of composers who are young, all the way to composers who are quite elderly. For instance, on one CD, we have a piece that had never been recorded by Elliott Carter, who, as you know, lived to be over 100. And so that's what we've done. It's a mission to get new music, primarily American music, but also music of from other countries, to a broader audience.
So how did you actually decide who to invite into this project, or just whoever's
well,
available at the time?
That goes to a different question, and that is, how do you choose repertoire for your own orchestra? I think programming is a combination of aspirational aspects, things that you really want to do as a conductor, as an organization. What do you want to present? And at the very top of that list is a piece needs to be accessible to your orchestra. They need to sound good playing that piece. So, and whatever effort they put into it has to have an enormous payoff. In my situation, this is how I think very important for the members of the orchestra. They don't have to like it the first day or even the first week, but as they get into the piece, it has to be the kind of piece that makes them get deep, that there's somewhere to go deep into the piece where they're going to be gratified by having put in all that work. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So a lot of the way I pick things is not just to represent different styles of music and different kind of waves of composition as they appear, but also to satisfy the orchestra that I have in front of me.
That's great. So in our previous conversations, we talked about Salon culture, and you mentioned you grew up in a household with a great appreciation for poetry, arts, and music. Could you tell us about that a bit more in depth, and your vision of how this kind of intersection of creative minds might come back in fashion, which I hope it does.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful conversation to have, and it's really essentially what we're doing is recreating the salon culture just by having these conversations. I think that I grew up with two parents who were writers, and it seemed like there were often, if not always, poets in the house. Sometimes they would move into our basement and stay there for weeks, and so I was very used to that kind of thing. And both of my parents, they were not professional musicians, but they were both very musical. And I had a grandmother who was a pianist, and my father was an amateur clarinetist, and both parents played the piano and sang and this kind of thing. So it was very much that kind of atmosphere in our house. People would come over and spend the whole evening talking about writing and the arts. And I think that your ideas of trying to bring back a salon culture are very positive. I think we tend now in the era of social media to do everything remotely, and especially coming out of the pandemic, we've been living so separately now for more than 2 years, and we've been struggling, I think, as human beings to find close connections with people, to actually be able to sit across the table from someone and talk about these things. I think we feed off of each other's energy. And as fantastic as Zoom has been, I think we all feel that the energy and the human connection is not the same via Zoom, even though it has brought us huge benefits to be able to stay in touch with each other across the world.
Indeed, yeah. Well, it's so wonderful to know you and Sam, and thank you, Emily, for this interview, and I hope to see you again soon, and possibly attend one of your concerts.
That would
and watch
be wonderful.
You conduct on stage, and that would be such a treat.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you very much.
Bring your conducting, your music, your CDs to New Zealand.
And we're very glad to have you. Very glad to have you, Sherry.
Thank you.
Yeah.